Welcome back to another episode of Spilling the Tea with Dr. T
And Gabriel G.
and Lava Lee.
Yeah, so welcome back to another episode. We're super excited to have you here and hopefully provide you some new information. Health related topics is our specialty. So we're going to be diving into one that I think is a pretty good question. I think can probably reach a wide variety of people. I think we've all, over the age of 21, have had alcohol at some point in our lives.
Yeah.
Sometimes in my past, I've used it very regularly, very often. And right now, not as often, not at all. But maybe in the future, it'll be another habit or something that we get to enjoy. But as of right now, it's just not our thing.
Not a priority.
Yeah. And we talked about that on another podcast that we do.
Outside of here, we do another podcast called Relations Podcast. You're following us. If you're watching our videos, you understand why. But today we're going to talk about weight loss and alcohol. Very curious about their relationship and how alcohol affects weight loss.
Yeah, so a lot of people, of course, have questions about how to lose weight. It's a pretty common topic as obesity rates continue to climb pretty much globally. So we want to know, like, what are the best ways to lose weight, healthy ways, and we often think immediately to the food that we're eating, and sometimes we seem to avoid the things that we're drinking, which is a lot of times where we're getting the bulk of our calories.
Yeah.
And so I thought it would be interesting not only to discuss how alcohol affects us calorically or how many calories and things like that is involved, but what is it doing on the inside of our body and how is that affecting our ability to lose weight or the process involved with losing weight. So let's see what we get out of this topic. Hopefully I teach you something.
Please.
Yeah.
I'm here eager to learn more things. Today we're not talking about anything sexual, unfortunately.
I know.
But it's a very interesting topic and I'm eager to learn.
And it's all related, right?
It's all related.
Sometimes one of the perks of losing weight is having more sex. You could have more sex to lose weight. It's a great activity to break a sweat, burn some calories.
This is all
sex is always
connected.
there. Sex is always connected.
This is all connected. At the end of all those videos that you're listening or watching, you're gonna feel better, more energized, and I hope you
Galvanized, ready to take
the universe.
the universe.
Yeah, so let's just dive into this incredible, amazing discussion with you.
All of my discussions with you are amazing.
Oh.
Okay.
First and foremost, what is the definition of weight loss?
Right. So everybody's going to have their own definition with what their goals are in regards to weight loss. But in general, weight loss is, of course, the loss of body weight, typically involving our body fat, the fluid in our body. Sometimes even muscle can constitute, weight loss if you're losing muscle. But everybody's journey is a little bit different. Some people in their weight loss journey lose a lot of body fat because it's a healthy way. Some people, unfortunately, will lose weight in a not so healthy way where they're going to see an increase in lean muscle mass being broken down. So we'll get more into the approach of trying to lose body fat, as that's the main goal for most people who are trying to lose weight.
So how common is alcohol consumption?
So alcohol consumption is going to vary from person to person, cultural changes and differences, religious differences, geographical differences. So alcohol consumption is going to be varied depending on where you're at, who you are. But if we're just specifically talking about Americans, there was a study done in 2019 by the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, big mouthful, which found that 55.6% of Americans over the age of 18 had had alcohol within the last month. So a pretty big amount of Americans are drinking alcohol. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that they're drinking it regularly or in excess or heavy. But in general, 1 in 2 adults are having alcohol on a monthly basis.
What is exactly the definition of binge drinking?
Right, so we've probably all heard at some point in our lives that binge drinking is bad. So binge drinking occurs when you are in one setting having enough alcohol to reach over 0.08% of your blood alcohol volume or concentration. And this is similarly the same value that is considered to be driving drunk or intoxicated in some states. Sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher. But in general, 0.08 seems to be the sort of classic definition. And the main sort of outline or understanding is this is typically a man having between 5 and 6 drinks in one occasion and a female having between 4 and 5 drinks in one occasion. So having a lot of drinks in a short period of time, binge drinking.
Have you ever binge drink?
Many, many, many times. It was probably my specialty. And when you're younger, you can handle binge drinking. Now, if I had an attempt at binge drinking, I would have to go to the hospital. So we're going to bring them back up again. The National Institute for Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism did another study, and in 2020 they found that about 1 in 4 adults had experienced an episode or encounter of binge drinking within the last month. So we know half of Americans are having at least one cocktail or one alcoholic beverage within every 1 month period, and then we know 1 in 4 is binge drinking within a monthly period. So kind of high, kind of a lot, but what can you say? What can you do?
People are just having fun, enjoying themselves.
Do the best you can. You do you.
You do you. I mean, as long as you're happy.
And, moderation.
Moderation, balance.
Technically, in the medical perspective, there is no moderation for binge drinking. It's never recommended. Unfortunately, that's just the reality.
It's
never
on the name. It's not moderate. So.
Yeah. And so I can't necessarily say as a physician that it's good to go, but you do you. And that's all we can say on that.
What about heavy drinking? What's the difference? What is heavy drinking?
So heavy drinking is a little bit more chronic. So this is defined as the CDC as a man having more than 2 drinks per day. Ooh. And a female or woman having more than 1 drink per day. So they have a little bit lower only because their body composition and what clinical evidence has shown us is that alcohol is stronger on the female body and hormones and can have more of a substantial impact. So men are able to, I guess, drink a little bit more based on the medical data and literature. Either way, that is what is considered by the CDC to be heavy drinking. So some reassuring data, the same organization, the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, did another study, and only about 7% of Americans seem to be considered heavy drinkers. So the more dangerous or the more frequent use of alcohol seems to be getting less and less as we kind of see these studies. So 1 in 2 is going to be drinking alcohol within the last month, even if that's just 1 glass. About 1 in 4 binge drink on a monthly basis, which is, 1 episode of having, 4 to 6. And then heavy drink use typically is less than 7%. So people who are having more than 1 beverage a day is even less. So 7% of Americans are around that sort of data figure.
That's still a lot of people drinking.
A lot of people drinking. Yeah. It's definitely a national problem, and something that needs to be addressed. And hopefully, maybe there's someone out there who doesn't know that they would consider themselves a heavy drinker. Maybe just 1 beer a night for some people, or a couple glasses of wine nightly can be considered their normal.
Right.
Maybe they're not sure that is actually considered heavy drinking and causing consequences throughout their body, especially over a prolonged period.
What about alcohol use disorder? What will be that?
Yeah, so alcohol use disorder is not so much about the amount of alcohol that you're taking in. It's more so of how much that alcohol is affecting your overall life. So if it's causing you physical, medical problems, is it impacting your ability to work? Is it impacting your social relationships? Is it a problem outside of just the recreational use of alcohol? And is it affecting other people around you? So alcohol use disorder, around 14.5 million people in the United States have been diagnosed since 2020. There was another clinical study done to sort of collect that data. And it's, pretty common. So it's definitely, again, a major issue that is a financial and sort of resource constraint on the American healthcare system. And it's really something that needs to be paid more attention to for sure.
How many millions of people?
14.5 million
That's
people.
That's a lot of millions of people.
Yeah, and about 8.5 are male and about 6 million are female. Crazy.
Crazy.
I know. And you think about the use of alcohol is a great way to escape personal problems, to have fun, to let loose. And so we do often see that sort of correlate with sort of national stress levels. Like, are people stressed financially, or is there a war going on? So we do see a lot of that, sort of relay into what people are trying to do in their free time to, make themselves feel better.
So you gave us definitions of what is binge drinking, what is alcohol use disorder, and what is heavy drinking. So what exactly is the relationship with weight loss and alcohol?
Yeah, we're going to get mostly into those fine details later, but in general, alcohol is one of the major sort of factors in determining how well your weight loss strategy is going to proceed. And of course, again, as I mentioned, a lot of us get a ton of calories from the drinks in our life. I was a big fan of sweet tea for many, many years, and it took me quite some time to let it go. But alcohol also contains a lot of calories. So first of all, the caloric intake associated with alcohol use is going to be important to discuss. Also, the relationship of alcohol on our metabolism and the complex sort of processes that happen there. Alcohol also impacts our appetite, so it's going to have an impact on how hungry we are, especially after drinking alcohol. And then, of course, alcohol use usually brings along with it some unhealthy habits, like an increase in being more sedentary or liking
Right.
to kind of sit around more. It makes you more tired. And so also more willing to eat maybe less healthy foods when you are also partaking in alcohol. Just less aware, of course, of some of the consequences of our actions.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Even the last time we binge drank, which was years ago, the first thing I wanted to do was get McDonald's.
I mean,
Yeah.
McDonald's after binge drinking sounds delicious.
Yes,
It's
until
the
I
best combination, right? You drink and then, you want to have some sort of compensation for your drinking. You want to have like fried food. You want to have burgers, fries, some sweets, snacks. And then you want to
Yeah.
sleep all day next day.
What I always tell myself is, oh, I have to eat really greasy food after I drink so it'll soak up all the alcohol. This was especially my excuse before I knew how alcohol worked, especially on weight and how our body metabolizes food, because what we'll get into later is all of that food was basically being stored as fat.
So let's get down in specifics. How many calories is there in alcohol?
Right, so alcohol is considered calorically dense, meaning that there's a lot of calories in a gram. Typically, there's about 7 calories per gram of alcohol, which is almost the same amount as there is calories in a gram of fat. So
Wow.
very close, right? We often think alcohol doesn't come with a lot of calories or a lot of problems, especially if you're drinking, straight hard liquor, things like that. But realistically, there is quite a bit of calories in alcohol, and it does help us sort of exceed that caloric daily intake that we would try to be cutting in order to lose weight.
Because we also, when we're binge drinking, we try to have just, let's say, tequila with a lime juice, thinking, oh, we're not drinking any calories. But like you're saying,
Right.
there's as much as calories in alcohol as in fat. So it's not like you're not drinking any calories. You're still drinking.
Right. And the calories are just the tip of the iceberg. We really haven't even gotten to what really is the major
Ooh.
problem with drinking and how it's going to make weight loss more difficult.
That's just the tip.
Just the tip.
But what is exactly the definition of a calorie?
Yeah, so calorie or calories is basically the unit of measurement for energy that we are able to extract from food. And so when you think of calories, we think of how many in a particular food, this or that, because our body is naturally burning an amount of energy at a resting rate. And also as we increase our exercise or move around, we're increasing the amount of calories being burned. But we need to know, how much is too much, because if it's in excess, all of those excess calories that are not being burned are getting stored as fat. So important to kind of have an idea in general of what many calories we're taking in every day.
Usually that average goes around 2,000 calories, 2,000, or it depends on each person.
It depends on each person. I think the sort of national standard is 2,000 calories is about what's recommended for the average person who has an average lifestyle and, is able to exercise and eat relatively well. Of course, calories are really important, but still picking the right foods is going to also be, an important part of your dietary sort of journey. Of course, if you are having low calorie alcohol, thinking that that's the way of skipping the problem, again, we'll get to that shortly, because yes, calories are a big player here, but there's also things at play that will affect our ability to lose weight and, cause us to gain weight. Interestingly enough, each pound of body weight typically is the result of an excess of 3,500 calories.
Wow.
So if you have this, recommended daily allotment of calories at 2,000 and you're burning those like you should be, because we should be breaking even every day, an excess of 3,500 calories, which seems like a lot, ends up being 1 pound. But as we all know, it happens pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah. It's very easy to eat that amount of calories.
Yeah. And in order to burn that amount of calories,
impossible.
which is what it costs to lose a pound of weight, as we know, because we, exercise often, we like to use the stationary bike, and we can kind of track how many calories is a 30-minute ride or this or that. 3,500 calories is a lot. So it takes a lot
Wow.
of energy to lose 1 pound of weight.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's like hours of cardio. Not even. I
Hours,
mean, I'll be,
days.
yeah, just to lose 1 pound.
Just to lose 1 pound.
It's funny because you can eat 3,500 calories very easily in one sitting.
That's dinner at the Cheesecake Factory.
That's true.
Literally.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy and it's delicious.
I know. So how does alcohol impact our metabolism?
Right. So beyond the fact that alcohol has lots of calories, it has a heavy impact on how our body is using energy and burning those sources of fuel, burning fat, burning sugar. And so what happens is when you drink alcohol, alcohol is quickly absorbed into the bloodstream and goes straight to the liver to be processed. And the liver is very specific in how it prioritizes what needs to be done first. And alcohol always comes first. The liver will always completely stop what it's doing in regards to your sugar metabolism and your fat metabolism and start immediately working to break down the alcohol. Of course, they know in the liver, all these very smart cells know alcohol is a poison, so it's trying to actively excrete it and break it down as quickly as possible. But that means all of the fat and the sugar that we are eating at the time is not getting broken down, even if we're starving, even if you haven't had anything to eat. Your body will process that later. And so what it does is start storing all of that sugar and all of that fat into basically fat on our body and creating, weight and mass gain on our body. Because again, the priorities are not to break
Wow.
down energy, it's to break down the alcohol.
It makes the whole system confused.
The whole system becomes confused.
Oh no.
Yeah,
It's not good.
not good.
So what do you mean alcohol metabolism is prioritized?
Right. So the liver is mainly responsible for collecting all of the nutrients that come from our stomach and throughout our colon and throughout of our small intestine, and brings it in and basically starts to process it and get rid of anything that could be poisonous or dangerous, but also take all those nutrients and start storing them away or using them for energy. So whenever we're drinking alcohol, the liver says, oh goodness, I see all these things coming in. There's sugar, there's fat, but there's alcohol. So I need to focus on that first. And so the glucose or sugar metabolism and the fat metabolism is basically put on pause, meaning it's just accumulating there and getting stored for later. And that way that our liver can focus on breaking down alcohol using two main enzymes. First, alcohol is converted to acetaldehyde through an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase. So this enzyme is taking priority, trying to shuffle everything over, again, because the liver knows alcohol is a poison and it's inflaming the hepatocytes or the cells of the liver. But then acetaldehyde
That's a drag name for sure.
is itself toxic as well. And this is actually the product that causes us to get sick or to get hungover. So there's usually a rate limiting step here because acetaldehyde dehydrogenase, which is the secondary enzyme, is very slow. And so oftentimes acetaldehyde will accumulate and cause things like headache, nausea, and those feelings that we get when we're hungover. And so that other enzyme then starts breaking it apart until it becomes these other byproducts that the body is able to excrete. But the main thing is the liver is prioritizing the alcohol and basically storing everything else as body fat.
Wow.
So not a good thing. Imagine if you're at dinner and you decide to go to the Cheesecake Factory where you can get a lovely 3,500 calorie meal easily that you're able to eat through in this one setting. I mean, you could just have my favorite, the bang bang chicken and shrimp,
The meatloaf.
or you can have a side of meatloaf, even a house salad on the side too, and then a big piece of cheesecake. You've already hit that quota.
Yeah.
But let's also add a couple beers or maybe a martini or two. So
It's dessert at the end. Why not?
Yeah, so you're eating all this food and you're drinking, but what's happening is all the alcohol is going straight into your liver first and telling your liver, hey, everything we have coming in, let's store it as fat. So a giant meal, even if you had not eaten anything all day, none of that is getting broken down and used for energy. It's all getting stored for later. So that means you're going to have all these calories you're going to have to try and burn off. And it's not going to happen the next day, as we know when we're on the bike and we don't burn that many calories in a day, So it's hard. It's really complicated. And alcohol is fun. Like we mentioned, it's really something that adds to an extra layer of entertainment when you're at dinner, when you're trying to get to know someone. And so I get it. I mean, I've taken part in drinking many a times, but I feel like we're just not educated well enough to understand that there is more than just getting drunk and driving, right? This is what we hear. Drinking and driving is horrible. Well, drinking in general is just as bad. There's a
Right.
lot of other consequences we should also be educated about just so we can make a more conscious decision. Is this going to be the best for me? If you know this information and you still think drinking is more important, you do you. That's completely fine. But I do feel like in general, we should all know some of these very basics that are associated with drinking alcohol.
Thanks to acetaldehyde.
Acetaldehyde is what makes you need acetaminophen, which is Tylenol.
All those names, they're beautiful.
Even just saying the name acetaldehyde makes me need a Tylenol.
Acetaldehyde. So how does alcohol impact the breakdown of fat in our bodies?
Right. So as we mentioned, when you are drinking or consuming alcohol, the liver is going to completely prioritize that process and basically pretend that the fat is not there and just start storing it away for later. And that's really the main goal of the liver, right? If you're not drinking alcohol, it's constantly responding to your body's requests for energy or storage, right? So if you are working out and your body's releasing all these chemicals saying, we need energy, the liver's going to say, all right, I got you. I'm going to start breaking apart these fats and breaking apart this sugar and get it to you as quickly as possible. And that's its main role. And then when you're taking a break or resting, or when you are feasting and your body's like, I've used all this energy, I don't want it to go to waste, so it starts preparing it for later. Well, regardless of what's going on, if you're drinking alcohol, if there's alcohol in your system, the liver is only going to be storing all of that energy for later.
They
So
make those choices for you.
yeah, so all that fat is just stopped in regards to being broken down and just starts getting accumulated.
And how does alcohol impact our nutrient absorption?
Right, so alcohol interferes with the essential nutrients being absorbed properly, especially fat-soluble vitamins. And so we have some that are fat-soluble and some that are water-soluble. That's for another topic on another day. But these particular vitamins are essential with their metabolic processes like breaking down sugar and breaking down fat. So again, this is another way in which alcohol makes those processes less effective.
What are those fat-soluble vitamins?
Right, so there's an acronym that's very popular in the medical community called ADDIC. So vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. And these are all absorbed as long as you have enough healthy fat in your diet so that it's absorbed with them throughout the stomach into the bloodstream. And again, these are the most important vitamins that are going to be having a difficulty with getting absorbed properly when you're drinking alcohol. And they're also very important with our metabolic processes, which help us to lose weight and keep our weight sustained.
They're very important to our body and balance.
It's all about body balance and ADDIC.
So how are those fat-soluble vitamins so important for our metabolism?
Right, so we can start with vitamin A. So vitamin A, or retinoic acid, is extremely important in the expression of genes inside of cells to allow for the metabolism of fat. Vitamin A will basically go into a cell and tell the genetic code, hey, we need you to express a particular gene, which will create a protein, which will help to break down fat. So it's this kind of complex process, but again, vitamin A is crucial to allowing the cell to properly break down fat and use it for energy. Next up is vitamin D, which is really important with our pancreas health and how our body's going to be producing insulin. Of course, insulin is the metabolite or the metabolic product that tells our cells to let sugar in so that the cell can use the sugar for energy purposes. So we need proper vitamin D to ensure that that metabolic process of breaking down sugar is regulated and normal. Also, vitamin E, a very powerful antioxidant, which helps to reduce inflammation, is important with insulin sensitivity, making sure, again, our cells are able to properly use blood sugar and keeping those blood sugar levels in check. And then vitamin K, which is actually has many different important functions, but we do know in regards to metabolism, it helps our bones and our bone cells use energy properly and helps them to break down sugar as well. So all of these vitamins come together and help us to keep all of our metabolic processes working normally and ensure that our weight is sustained. And if we're trying to lose weight, of course, we need all of those to help support that process.
We need all the vitamins that we can get.
Hey, can't overdo it on vitamins. Actually, this is actually an interesting side tip. You can overdose on fat-soluble vitamins because they're not easily excreted from the body either. They need to be excreted through fat. You can overdo it. You can have too much vitamin D, too much vitamin K.
Wow.
The ones you can't overdo technically would be the water-soluble vitamins because if you
vitamin
have
C.
too many, you can just pee them out.
Right.
So if you have too much vitamin C, you just
That's
urinate it
fine.
out. But yeah, do be aware. It's not something that's commonly we don't see people come into the ER very often for a vitamin D overdose, but technically it's possible.
So now that we learned how alcohol impacts our metabolism, how does alcohol impact our appetite?
So we happen to know through clinical studies that alcohol actually increases our appetite due to the fact that it also increases our serotonin and our dopamine. Wow. So those feel-good hormones that we have, which are often associated with the pleasure we experience and the fun that we have with drinking, those serotonin and dopamine also further enhance how hungry we are. And so there's this strong correlation. The more dopamine and serotonin released while you're drinking, the more likely you're going to get hungry. And those two hormones or neurotransmitted chemicals in our brain also love the finer, sweeter things in life, right? So dopamine and serotonin are going to say, let's keep it yummy, which is going to make us make poor choices when it comes to what food we want to eat as we get more hungry.
So one bad habit brings the other bad habit.
You know, that's the body. It's more like a, slippery slope. When you look at each and every process of things in regarding disease, it's almost like always like a tipping point, right? There's always something that leads to something else, that leads to something else, and multiple factors seem to like to jump all in at once. So yeah, the body likes to make things complex for us sometimes.
It's exhausting.
So alcohol also will impact a hormone that's released from the stomach that's really important with telling our brain that it's full or to reduce appetite, called ghrelin. Ghrelin. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, great question.
What's ghrelin?
What's ghrelin? You're just going to tell me ghrelin? And
what's ghrelin?
Let's talk about ghrelin.
Let's talk about ghrelin.
So ghrelin is often referred to as the hunger hormone. It's released by the stomach, and it particularly is released when the stomach is empty. So the stomach has a lot of chemical receptors that tell our brain things. It also has a lot of hormonal receptors. It also has stretch receptors. So when the stomach has been sort of collapsed because it's not stretched from all the food inside and it's empty, your stomach will release something called ghrelin, telling your brain, hey, I'm hungry. Let's crank up the appetite. Let's get things moving. We need more energy. Problem is, alcohol stimulates that ghrelin release from the stomach, regardless of whether or not it's full or it's not. So we happen to know in these three chemical pathways, serotonin, dopamine, and ghrelin, alcohol is causing us to feel more hungry the more we drink it.
I feel like the ghrelin in my body is very loud. It's always hungry. I'm always hungry.
You sure can clear a plate, that's for sure.
Blame it on the ghrelin.
Blame it on the ghrelin.
It's all his fault.
That's what we should start saying. Blame it on the ghrelin.
Not me, it's the ghrelin.
It's the ghrelin.
So how does alcohol affect our food choices?
So alcohol consumption is often associated with us making poor food choices, but the question is why? So there's been clinical research on this topic to kind of figure out what could it be. Of course, we know alcohol impairs our judgment and impairs our cognitive function. So we're more likely to make choices for the immediate rather than the future. So of course, going for things that are quick, easily accessible, which are oftentimes fast food, processed food. We certainly don't want to like prepare a meal after you've been drinking. That does not sound appealing. And then we also know that because of the dopamine and the serotonin surge, our body becomes craving of those signals. And what else causes the dopamine and serotonin surge? Of course, sugar. So our body is going to be saying, hey, we need more of this activity. Let's keep the mood lively. And so we create this idea to start craving things and start wanting to eat foods that are, of course, more unhealthy for us.
So how does alcohol disrupt our metabolic hormones?
Right. So we talked about how alcohol impairs our metabolism. We talked about how alcohol makes us choose poor food options. And now, how does it affect our hormones? So there are multiple ways in which alcohol is going to cause a disruption in our normal hormone production and the use of our hormones. The main hormones involved or chemical stimuli are going to be testosterone, estrogen, our insulin, as well as our cortisol.
So how does alcohol impact our testosterone production?
So alcohol is rapidly absorbed into the bloodstream and it's able to cross the blood-brain barrier, meaning it's able to go from the blood into nerves in the brain and neurons in the brain and cause problems. What we see in regards to testosterone production is alcohol will prevent the release of something called luteinizing hormone and follicular stimulating hormone. Both of these come from the pituitary gland, and in our previous video, we talked about how there's something called the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, which is this really complicated system. But basically, these two stimuli are supposed to come from the pituitary gland, FSH and LH, and tell your testicles, hey, crank up the volume, let's make more testosterone, our body needs it. But alcohol will prevent the normal release of FSH and LH. So those chemicals that are meant to tell your testicles to do their job are not being released, and thus the testicles are not responding or creating more testosterone as they should be. We also know that alcohol is extremely inflammatory, especially on certain cells, the nerves and neurons in the brain being one of them, others being the cells lining the reproductive tract, so the testes, all the important structures that are used to develop hormones like testosterone are also going to be impacted there. So in two ways, it's a double whammy in how alcohol is going to damage our testosterone production, mainly, again, from the pituitary gland, preventing that LH and FSH release, as well as damaging the actual structures of the testes. So not good for testosterone values.
Poor testosterone.
Alcohol and testosterone do not go well together.
They don't like each other,
They do not like each other. But, what can you do? Sometimes you just don't like somebody.
You feel like you're more testosterone or alcohol?
Depends on the day.
Yeah.
Depends on my testosterone levels.
I feel like I'm a gremlin. I'm gremlin. Gremlin.
You're a gremlin.
I'm a gremlin.
You're hungry. Insatiable.
We're learning words here. Big words.
Big words. This is actually an English class.
Acetaldehyde.
Acetaldehyde.
Lubrification.
These are deep cuts.
Okay.
If you haven't watched our previous videos, you're not going to understand these jokes. So you got to get on it.
This is the T universe.
The Hendrix cinematic universe.
So we learned about testosterone. How about estrogen values? How does alcohol impact them?
So as men, we do need a proper ratio of our hormones in regards to testosterone versus estrogen. We do need some estrogen as it's important to help with our skin health, our libido, our immune system. But one of the consequences of heavy alcohol consumption, even on a short period of time, the liver cells, number one, are responsible for breaking down our hormones, especially as they get older, right? We don't have testosterone and estrogens floating out around us 24/7. Over time, they get broken down. The liver is responsible for doing that. So if the liver is in charge of breaking down alcohol, they're going to prioritize that over breaking down estrogen. So it allows for a sort of a backup of estrogen to develop in the bloodstream, because there's always new estrogen being formed, but it's not being excreted properly from the liver. Number two, we do know that heavy alcohol consumption, even in a short period of time, is going to increase body fat, whether that is all over the body or in a short place. And we do know that body fat cells have an enzyme in them called aromatase.
We learned that.
Yeah, we learned that in a previous video. And so aromatase will convert some of your testosterone into estrogen. So the more body fat you have, the more estrogen. So that's number two. Number three, we know alcohol actually stimulates the enzyme aromatase. So not only is it going to make more of it because there's more body fat, alcohol tells aromatase, hey, let's kick it up, let's make more estrogen. So in these three ways, we're having this disruption in our normal hormone cycle, which then will result in things like erectile dysfunction,
Oh my God.
low testosterone, fatigue.
Domino effect.
Yeah, a domino effect.
Everything's connected. Everything in our body is intertwined.
You know how Yoga
Can't
with
escape.
Adrienne, she always says everything is connected.
That's
You
true.
may be
yeah.
stretching your ankle, but it's connected to your nose. And right now you need to focus on your breathing.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's all
One thing leads
connected.
to the other.
One thing leads to the other.
So how does alcohol impact the insulin sensitivity?
Right, so we've talked about testosterone, we've talked about estrogen, now let's move on to insulin. So if you've heard of insulin insensitivity or insulin sensitivity, this is basically the ability for a cell to respond or be sensitive to insulin. Think of insulin like the Amazon delivery guy. He comes and he presses your doorbell and you open the door and the Amazon package is glucose. Okay, so alcohol makes it very difficult for the doorbell to work. So insulin is there, the Amazon delivery man is here,
Oh my
he's
God.
ringing the doorbell, but you're not hearing it. So that's what alcohol does, or what we would consider insulin insensitivity. The cell is not responding to the signal from the carrier pigeon or the person who's bringing your package, and you can't open the door to let the sugar in. And so of course, then all those packages start
Gonna be
piling
left out.
up. right? And just like that, all the sugar is piling up in our blood. And so that's why we have this problem where blood sugar levels go up and it can cause very serious consequences over time. Of course, one night of having your blood sugar spike, the next day, if you're a healthy person, you're going to be fine. But as that accumulates over time, again and then again, increases your risk of diabetes, of course. That is what diabetes mellitus type 2 is basically your doorbell no longer works. It also increases the risk of all the consequences associated with having too much blood sugar in your bloodstream, irritation to the blood vessels, irritation to the nerves, and all these other, issues that can arise from having too much sugar.
And all because of those packages left out.
All the packages are in the rain, in the snow,
Accumulating.
in the heat, accumulating, and you just don't open the door. You don't even know.
You're not even listening.
The Ring doorbell has not given you the alert on your phone that you have a package.
All because of who? Alcohol.
There's always a big bad wolf.
So how does the alcohol impact the cortisol levels?
Right. So again, we've gone through testosterone, we've gone through estrogen, we've gone through insulin. Now let's get to cortisol. So cortisol is an interesting stress hormone. So typically when I think of stress, I think of the fight or flight response, right? So what's going to make our heart beat faster? That's adrenaline. Adrenaline is not cortisol. Cortisol is sort of like what comes after the adrenaline. So adrenaline makes your heart beat really fast. You're like trying to run fast, get out of the situation, or you're going to fight. Well, all of that causes quite a bit of trauma on your body, right? You're using everything at its maximum strength. So cortisol comes in and says, everybody just relax a little bit. Let's do some healing. But it has prolonged effects. So usually cortisol is supposed to spike, help you respond to an external trauma or stressor, and then move on. But in the 21st century and how we live, cortisol levels remain high for a lot longer and can cause problems. And so we also see a tight correlation between alcohol consumption and increased levels of cortisol. And similarly, how I've explained that cortisol is meant to kind of help everything relax, it's also a major player in helping our body accumulate body fat because it's wanting to store energy for later, right? So the adrenaline has come, you've broken down lots of body fat to create energy, and cortisol saying it's all over, but we're still stressed, so let's try to calm everybody down. I'm going to be over here storing some body fat and doing some other things. So unfortunately, the ultimate point of me explaining this way is that alcohol causes cortisol to increase. The increased cortisol results in us having an increase in body fat, specifically in the abdominal area. For some reason, cortisol loves to lay it in that area. And so there is a tight correlation between alcohol use and abdominal body fat.
So the skinny fat that we learn?
No, so exactly. So abdominal fat is actually both. So it can be visceral, so inside the abdomen, but also subcutaneous. There's a lot of subcutaneous tissue here. So easy place to put body fat. But really it's both visceral and subcutaneous.
That's another
deep cut from a previous video.
Yeah. So how does alcohol impair exercise performance and recovery?
So number one, alcohol is a diuretic. A diuretic means it makes you urinate and excrete fluid, which is oftentimes why when we drink excessively or even not that much, you notice that you pee more, especially throughout the night. So alcohol is going to make you at a predisposition to get dehydrated. So you need to be aware of that, especially if you're drinking before exercising or if you're drinking before a big sort of physical activity the next day. Know that you'll need to double up on your hydration even the following day, making sure you stay well hydrated to deal with whatever you have to do physically. We also know that alcohol is going to impact our ability for our muscles to grow and to recover. Alcohol can impact and prevent protein synthesis, the most important way in which our muscle cells grow and strengthen, elongate, make themselves stronger. So we know that that is an important player there. But something else is, of course, as we've discussed, alcohol prevents the proper metabolism of fat and sugar, which are vital energy sources for our body to use, especially when we're exercising or doing something physically demanding. So a lot of times, especially if you have diabetes or something where your blood sugar and your metabolism is tightly regulated and you need to know how much energy you need to have available for activities, you don't want to be drinking too much alcohol because it's going to put you at risk to develop hypoglycemia or a change in your blood sugar that may affect your ability to perform and can cause significant, problems medically. Of course, we also know alcohol damages our ability to produce testosterone normally and our body's ability to use that testosterone that we've produced, which is highly important in our body's ability to build muscle, maintain muscle, and then finally, all those important nutrients nutrients that are being absorbed are blocked by alcohol use. So many different factors in how alcohol can not only impact our hydration status, but make it more difficult for us to perform and grow muscle. So definitely not something you want to do before a marathon or a heavy weightlifting session. Sometimes they actually have beer at some of these
Right.
places, which is sort of strange. But hey, marketing is marketing, and you got a business selling beer. You got thirsty people at an event, but I definitely would not recommend even a glass of beer at
Wow.
something like
Not even a little
before.
bit.
It's just going to impact your performance, right? So
Mhm.
if you're trying to perform optimally, why would you have anything that would affect that? So it just depends on what your goals are.
Just give them water.
I mean, just water's fine.
Water is
Or
just
some
fine.
sort of like,
Juice.
s- even juice is better. I mean, I'm not a
I
big
mean,
advocate for juice, but
no, right.
Gatorade,
Yeah.
something with sugar
Yeah,
in
something we
it.
should because they're about to perform
Right.
exercise.
You
So,
can't even use any of the sugar that
right.
you've had in your Gatorade if you have a beer after, because your body's working on breaking down the alcohol. Can't provide you that necessary sugar. So not the best choice, in my opinion.
This is just our opinion.
This is an opinion-based medical podcast with a visual component and no audio only component because we're forcing you to watch us and listen to us here on YouTube.
We're forcing
You're
you.
forced.
Watch us. How does alcohol cause fatty liver disease?
Right. So this is a very interesting medical diagnosis. Fatty liver disease is basically the result of too much fat being near or attached to the liver that it's causing problems. So kind of similar to what we talked about in our previous video, that visceral fat is meant to keep our organs supported and to protect them. But sometimes if it becomes too large, if there's too much fat there, it can cause damage to those organs. So we see this happening in the liver specifically. And we know this happens because the liver is so important in the regulation and metabolism of body fat. So whenever you're having too much alcohol, especially on a chronic period of time, over long, weeks, months, years, all of that retention of body fat, which occurs as our body stops processing body fat and the fat that we eat regularly, it just keeps getting attached to the liver. And over time, it starts to damage those liver cells. And so we can see actually people have to have a liver transplant.
Oh my
It
God.
gets to be so severe over time if it hasn't been adequately treated. The great thing about fatty liver disease is it is reversible. You can make changes and habit adjustments that can help to reverse it completely and allow your liver to rebound. It's just difficult though if alcohol is a part of your lifestyle and how you live in the sort of routine of your day to day.
It's never too late to
It's
make
never too
changes
late.
in your life.
That's true. I like that. So, kind of to just recap everything we talked about, the main sort of overview of how alcohol affects our ability to lose weight, maintain weight, or gain weight. Alcohol has a strong relationship with our metabolism. It has a strong relationship with our hormone production. It's going to affect our liver function. It's also going to have impacts on our appetite, how hungry we are. So there's many different ways in which alcohol can have these negative sort of responses, especially if our goals are to lose weight. That being said, in moderation, things can be done successfully and healthily. We see 1 in 2 average American adults have alcohol on a monthly basis, even if it's a small amount, and we don't see that much risk, associated with small, moderate amounts of using alcohol. Unfortunately, the data is coming out, though, that says literally no alcohol use is considered safe. Even the smallest amount has
Wow.
negative impacts on the nerves in our brain and the neurons in our brain. But we live in a very fun society where things are meant to be about pleasure. We are meant to do things that make us happy. And in moderation, I think alcohol can be a fun way to let loose and enjoy time with your friends and family. That being said, talk to your own doctor, find out what's best for you, make your own choices. I do think it's important that if you are around people who want to cut down their drinking and are needing resources, always be supportive and always understand that everyone's journey is different. Maybe you want to cut down, maybe your friends don't, maybe you don't want to drink at all, maybe you want to drink a lot and your friends don't. Just support each other and understand we're all on our own journey and everybody's different.
Be supportive.
Be supportive, be nice, be friendly, be kind. It's free. and it's pretty easy to do. I just understand we're all different, and what we want out of our lives are different. And those things need to be taken into account even when you talk to your doctor. If your doctor is telling you you should never drink alcohol and it's a big part of your social sort of routine, you're not going to find a good relationship with that physician. You need someone who understands who you are, and yeah, I could go on and on, but that's my recap.
I feel like you said, alcohol is part of our culture, right? Not just American, but in Brazil too. Alcohol is a way for people to have fun, to reward themselves after a long day of work, or reward themselves on the weekends. And unfortunately, sometimes they use alcohol not in a balanced way. And I think in life, everything's about balance. And if you can find your balance, if you can
Yeah, find your balance.
find your balance.
I agree.
Well, let's go to my favorite section of this podcast with visual component.
Read me, Gabriel.
Okay, this is a good question. Are there certain drinks that are worse than others, or they're all the same?
Some drinks are definitely going to be worse for you than others. Things that have lots of calories, typically cocktails that have a lot of mixers or additives, are certainly not going to only provide you alcohol, which has a lot of calories, but all those other things, a lot of sugar, of course, you want to watch out for. That being said, too, you want to try and maybe consider drinks that have a little bit less alcohol content, because alcohol itself has a lot of calories. But yeah, they're definitely healthier options. Just be aware of the things in the drink and how that all sort of adds together. I think the problem for me when I in the past would order, a cocktail, is you don't really have time to think about all those different
Right.
ingredients and what's there. And honestly, in the past, I wasn't super worried about losing weight when I was drinking, because I didn't even think that that would be possible. I could kind of tell that drinking was not helping, and so again, your choices aren't aligned typically when you're drinking, like, which is the healthiest option on the menu. You're just kind of going for it.
No, yeah. And also when you drink a sugary cocktail, you might drink more cocktails because it's sugar, so it tastes delicious. So you're gonna drink
more and more and more.
5 of them at least. So
For sure. Last time we had alcohol, we had, I think, tequila soda, which tastes like the bottom of a shoe. But still, we managed to put a few down.
a couple, but that was enough.
I ended up nearly going to the hospital. I don't tolerate alcohol well. In case you didn't know, anyone out there who's ever been around me drinking,
He's sensitive.
It's not my thing. Ooh.
Are there any social and behavior aspects of drinking that can get in the way of losing weight?
Absolutely. So most of us, when we do drink, do it for social reasons, to be around friends, to have fun, to let loose. And so a lot of times we're waiting for that end of the day or end of the weekend. And so it's really just about setting limits and being mindful. You can continue in moderation, but you just want to be aware of how many calories are coming in at the end of the day, especially that you are sort of putting off or holding space for in regards to alcohol. Personally, I love food so much that I can't imagine lowering the amount of food I eat to make space for alcohol. So, it may not be easy. And I definitely think if socialization is a big part of your alcohol use, it's going to be a difficult battleground, but you just have to start sort of drawing the line somewhere. And even those small sort of changes or decisions to limit your alcohol intake will make a substantial change in your progress. So little by little is the main thing, and just realizing it is a journey. You don't have to do it all right away. Give yourself some time.
Yeah, baby steps.
Baby steps.
You're going to get there.
You're going to get there.
Speaking of baby steps and speaking of making gradual changes, is there a way to drink responsibly? And if there is, so how can we achieve that?
Yeah, so you can drink responsibly and still try to lose weight. You just, again, want to be mindful and drink in moderation. Pick choices that, again, don't have a ton of calories. Pick choices that maybe will allow you to have one drink instead of multiple throughout the night. In the past, when I would try to drink for longer periods because I can't handle my alcohol, I would drink, Mick Ultra or something that I knew didn't have a lot of alcohol content, low calorie, and I could drink it for a long period of time. So maybe adjusting to something, if you like to drink often, that is low calorie, or have your favorite drink, which is one. So, just trying to figure out how it's going to work best for you and still be able to limit the amount or draw some sort of line or limit for yourself.
Everything balanced, everything moderation.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the secret.
That's the hopefully main message of this whole, episode, is everything in moderation, everything in balance.
Did you get that? Is it true that drinking alcohol it speeds up metabolism and it helps with weight loss?
In an ideal world, absolutely. But unfortunately, we live in the real world and it does the wrong direction, right? So, alcohol is going to reduce metabolism, slow down weight loss, almost impeding it completely. So, definitely a false statement or false question there. But
That's more than false. It's like completely false.
it's the complete opposite. But some people do believe that actually, that alcohol
Yeah.
can actually speed up your metabolism. And that's just hearsay. And, if they heard from a reputable source, how can you really, I don't know, information is information.
Is it true that choosing a low carb alcoholic beverage means it won't affect your weight loss?
Right. So choosing a low carb alcoholic beverage is certainly going to help to reduce the amount of calories, especially if you were using alcoholic beverages that had more carbs in the past. But that's not the main way in which alcohol impacts our weight loss journey, right? It's certainly important to be mindful of the calories that you're intaking, but alcohol itself is going to have a problem creating this sort of dysregulation of the metabolism in the liver, which we've talked about previously. So ultimately, alcohol in general is always going to have a negative effect on your weight loss journey, but choosing things that are lower carb or lower calorie definitely is a great moderation, or meeting in the middle. So certainly do make that choice if you're trying to lose weight. Just know it's not going to completely prevent you from having, the unfortunate effects of drinking alcohol.
Just one step.
Just one
You're gonna
step.
need more than that.
Maybe more than that.
Is it true that red wine is a weight loss friendly option because of its antioxidants?
I think this is a great question. A lot of people think that the benefits of red wine outweigh any negative effects. And while red wine does have a lot of antioxidants, and there's clinical studies to show that it does have some benefits, it also is usually very high in calories. It's also very high in alcohol content,
Right.
which is going to, again, have an impact on your weight loss journey. So I always say to people when they're coming to me saying, I want to lose weight, my first question is, do you drink wine? Because a lot of people don't consider it to be, something that is easily done in excess. Wine is great with dinner and it's very fun when you're in a social setting, but it is a big culprit in making weight loss difficult. So certainly red wine is one of those things you want to try and cut out or drink in moderation if you're trying to lose weight.
Is it true that skipping meals can offset the calories from alcoholic drinks?
Another great question. Yeah. So there is no proof that skipping meals is going to help you to lose weight, especially if you're drinking alcohol. So you don't want to go into this thinking you can kind of even keel. I'm going to skip lunch and drink more with dinner. Unfortunately, if you skip a meal, it's more likely that when you do eat again, especially with alcohol, your body's going to be storing all of that as fat for later. So be conscious that skipping meals is not an appropriate way to sort of moderate your alcohol use. You still need to have a healthy diet, even if you are, drinking alcohol in moderation.
Everything in moderation.
Everything in moderation. That is the goal here. Everything in moderation.
I think those are all my questions or my myths, and
Wow.
you respond to all of them.
I do my best. Well, this was fun. I
Yeah.
think it was definitely a learning process for me too, being able to kind of research some of this stuff further, and hopefully you learned a little bit.
I did. I'm
Yeah.
definitely drinking with moderation, looking to make the best choices
Yeah.
if I decided to drink, because we usually don't drink. But in case I decide to drink one day, who knows?
Who knows?
I'll make the best choices.
Absolutely. And hopefully this will help you make the best choices for you. I really appreciate you joining us on this episode. It was a lot of fun to talk about how alcohol impacts weight loss. Again, a very common topic patients ask me. If you have questions, concerns, things that you thought about throughout the podcast or want us to address in the future, leave them in the comments below.
Let us know. We are eager to know what you think. What are your recommendations? What are your questions? We are always looking at the comments, and if you have any recommendations of any other topic,
Yeah, let us know.
Let us know.
We'll get to that at some point. And if you liked this video, don't forget we're supposed to tell you to
Share, like,
subscribe,
comment, subscribe,
donate, screenshot, drop a pin, all the above. And we look forward to seeing you next time
Thanks for
on
watching.
another episode. Thanks for watching.
Yes.
See you then.
See you. I know. Because their peel is full of antioxidants, and that protects the core of the apple.
The core has no antioxidants.
Nothing.
Oh, here. It's going to be ASMR.